growth, success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Road to Growth listeners. Today I have Robin Hills. He is the business psychologist and emotional intelligence trainer. Oh, my God, I might get dissected during this interview. Thank you, Robin, for being here today.
It's my pleasure, Vinny. Thank you for hosting me and inviting me onto the show.
You're also an author and also, a couple other hats. When someone asks you, what do you do, Robin? How do you describe yourself?
Well, I describe myself as an emotional intelligence coach, trainer, and facilitator, and that really just kind of sums everything up. How do I train? How do I coach? How do I facilitate? Well, I do it live, face-to-face. I do it online. I do it through courses. I also do it through my books and through various other methods.
What's the usual response when that comes about, when you kind of relay what you do?
Well, a few years ago, a lot of people would look at me incredibly blankly because they hadn't even heard the term emotional intelligence. And I think as time's gone by, people really do understand now what emotional intelligence is more about. But a lot of people kind of look at me and say, well, what makes you different from all the other trainers and coaches and facilitators? And the easy answer to that is I work with people to help them improve their relationships with other people, to build up authentic relationships, make good quality decisions, and really manage their emotions and other people's emotions. And how do we work with that? Well, we look at applying emotional intelligence, and we do that through leadership, communication skills, team working, conflict management, collaboration, all those good things. But we do it in a very person-centered approach. What is it that makes people different? What is it that people do when they're working to their strengths? How do they use their energy and their emotions well in order to do things slightly better than other people?
Well, let's rewind, Robin. At a young age, were you basically self-aware of people's emotions, self-aware of being a leader? Who were you at a young age?
To be honest with you, no, I wasn't very self-aware, and I think the self-awareness came over a period of time. And to be honest with you, Vinny, I still get it wrong. I'm human like everybody else, so I'm always learning. I'm always looking out for ways to improve myself. I missed something critical. Oh, isn't that interesting? So rather than berating myself for missing something interesting, why did I miss it? When it's perfectly obvious it's in front of my face. Well, like I say, I'm human like the next person. So just got to accept that I'm not the beer, and seer of everything. I'm not God Almighty. I can't be everywhere all the time. And I can't account for everything at every possible moment. So I concentrate on things that are important to me and things that energize me. And if it means that I miss something, so be it.
Well, having the ability to know that you're going to get things wrong, that you're going to miss things, allows you to learn, allows you to grow. For the people that they know or think they know everything, they're probably not going to get to where they want to get to, right?
No, that's right. And I think that there are so many leaders out there that have got to a position where everybody looks up to them and aspires to be like them. Those leaders really have lost their vulnerability, and they like to assume that they are God's gift to leadership. And so they act and behave as if they know everything. And they don't like making mistakes. They don't like people saying to them, oh, you've overlooked something. And I think the important thing is just to allow people the opportunity to say, hey, I've screwed up here. I've made a mistake. What is it I can do differently next time? How can I learn from it? How can I grow through this? And how can I become better?
Well, before I jump back into, again, your story, I'm really curious about that idea. With our society now, where we get snapshots of people's life on social media and we see the perfection, or that the glimmer of perfection, right? How does a leader basically be okay with allowing vulnerability and not personify that perfection throughout their day?
Well, what we want people to be is authentic, and to be authentic versions of themselves, and to aspire towards doing things as well as they possibly can do. Therefore, aspire towards perfection, but know that it's completely unattainable, and get as close to it as possible. But just recognize that there are going to be some people out there better than you are, who are capable of doing other things that you can't do. There are certain things that you can do. What is it that are those special gifts, those special talents that makes you a leader, that separates you aside from all the other leaders out there?
Well, okay, let's rewind again, Robin. So, who was Robin? Let's say you mean a teenager Robin. Who was a young Robin?
Well, my father is a minister of religion, and I was dragged along to church twice a week, even three times a week, against my better judgment. So I was forced into sitting there and listening to him pontificating from the pulpit on a regular basis. I moved away from the church. My brothers and sisters have moved away from the church. My father's still very much part of the church. But I've got to look back at it and say, well, it's made me the man who I am. It's focused me on a core set of values and a core set of principles that I use to strive to be the best that I possibly can within my work, and to be more empathetic and sympathetic, and to be kind to other people. And those are the kind of morals and values that are inherent on anybody coming up through their teenage years. It's just that I kind of had a more of a religious slant to it.
Okay, and this is, I mean, I guess a question that just kind of popped in my head. So, being that you grew up in a religious family, right? And usually the pastor, the priest, is basically a leader figure in those communities. Have you seen the transition of those leaders? Because the idea is, right, you're infallible, they're getting the word from God, so on and so forth. Have you seen how they basically lead their congregations change over time? And I know you've kind of stepped away from religion, yet you've probably seen them from the outside looking in with your father, and probably, I mean, other avenues. Have you seen anything like that? Or
Yeah, yes, it's a really interesting question, Vinny, because when I think about it, I suppose part of what I found during my teenage years is that these leaders within the church community were vulnerable. They
oh,
were human.
hmm,
They would do things that I wouldn't expect them to do if they were as God-fearing as they suggested that they should be.
hmm.
But uh, I see them doing good stuff, but with the infallibility of the fact that they can get it wrong, or they just perhaps don't necessarily come up to everybody's expectations, despite what they say and what they do.
Well, okay, you're moving along, you're getting older, and then you got into sales, correct?
I did, yes, yes.
Okay.
No, it's interesting because ministers' sons, vicars' sons usually choose two paths to travel along. They either go into the church themselves, or they completely rebel. They drop out from society, and that seems to be, well, broad sweeping generalizations, but it seems to be a path that most ministers' sons take. Well, I didn't take either of those. I suppose I went into selling purely and simply because I understood selling as being the opportunity to influence and persuade people, and to make the decisions that they needed to make by providing them with the appropriate level of choices. Now, how does that go back to my teenage years? Well, to a certain extent, my father was selling ideas from the pulpit, so perhaps I picked up something from him. And I went into medical selling because my mother was a nurse and she worked in the clinical field. So perhaps it was a combination of the two of them coming together. I don't know. I don't know. But it was something that really interested me. And it was something that energized me as a very young man starting in my career. And I must say I thoroughly enjoyed it.
What sort of sales did you start into?
Well, I was selling prescription medicines. I don't like to use the word drugs because it has different connotations. I was selling prescription medicines in North and East London, going around the general practitioners and the chemist shops. And then eventually the role changed and I moved into selling in the teaching hospitals for a very large, well-known pharmaceutical company. And I was selling anti-infectives, which is a highly competitive field to work in, anti-ulcer medication, gastroenterology medication, and oncology medicines.
Now you're doing sales and then you're moving up the ranks. When does the point happen where you actually are leading other people?
Well, I got the opportunity to move up to the northwest of England, away from London, to move out of um, the traditional face-to-face selling to move into a leadership role. And that was the transition that took me away from London, took me away from the day-to-day selling role and more of a people development role. And that was a very challenging role for me in a number of different ways. And I did that probably for about 4 or 5 years with a lot of changes occurring both in the marketplace and internally within the teams that I was working with.
What sort of challenging aspects happened during that transition?
Well, I think a lot of it was, look, if I can be perfectly blunt, it was me learning leadership. So you just do not learn these things out of a book. And there were certainly at the time were not the opportunities that people have got today to hear from other entrepreneurs through podcasts. You pick it up through the radio, you pick it up through magazines, you pick it up through books. You'd go away and try things. And if it worked, brilliant. And if it didn't, you'd have to pick yourself up and learn through that process.
So what were some of the things that you were picking up and learning as being a leader? I think for a lot of people out there, they can push themselves, they can teach themselves, but when they transition what they learn into actually teaching other people, that transition can be fairly difficult. I mean, so what were things that you picked up and learned?
It can be. It can be. I think in the first instance, it wasn't until perhaps even years afterwards that I realised that I was trying to lead by being a very good manager. So I was trying to manage people and manage the tasks of manage the process rather than actually leading the people, saying, hey, you've got the experience, you've got the knowledge, you've got the client relationships. Go away and make this stuff happen in the best possible way that you know how. It was almost a case of, I've earned my spurs in selling. I know how to do it. I know what to do. You can become a better salesperson by listening to me. And of course, that then drove certain very challenging and often very bizarre behaviors in the team. But I think hand on heart, I've actually got to take responsibility for those behaviors. And those behaviors came from me. So that was part of my learning journey.
What's the difference, or one of the bigger differences, I guess, from being a leader from being a manager?
Well, very, very simply, in my eyes, a manager manages processes and a leader manages people. No, let me rephrase that. A manager leads processes and drives tasks, whereas a leader leads people and drives people to do the best that they possibly can.
Now, as you're in that role, I mean, it sounds like there's probably a little frustration. When do you start like learning? And I know you talked about the radio a little bit. I mean, what avenues are you picking up to actually become a better leader?
Well, I think a lot of it came through learning, reading, talking to other people, finding out what their experiences were, and also learning through my own managers and my own leaders, and listening to their advice and putting in place some of the learning that they had put in place, and just trying out a few things, getting feedback, finding out what people like about what I do, and finding out what people didn't like about what I do, so that I could actually take it on the chin and go away and think and reflect on it and say, okay, right, what do I need to do that differently?
Has your process of getting honest feedback from when you originally started asking that question to now changed?
Not really. I think you've just got to ask for the feedback. Uh, Take whatever you get, put it through a filter of the fact that it's one person's opinion. If you're getting very, very regular feedback from a number of different people who are all saying the same thing, I think you've got to take note and listen to it. And I also ask people, well, what would you like to see me doing? How can I do things better? And to be brave enough to actually adapt and work around that, and then ask them for further feedback. How did that work? Is there anything else I could do better? So it's a case of retaining your core qualities of who you are and what you are within that, not trying to become all things to all people, which goes back to the question that you asked me earlier around self-awareness. So it's having this self-awareness and knowing what it is that makes you special, what it is that makes you different. And in the intervening period, around the same time, I trained to become a Myers-Briggs type indicator practitioner, which gave me an insight into psychological type and the various different ways in which people work with their behaviors and work with their preferences, and how they manifest themselves when people are working on a day-to-day basis, in small groups or in large teams, and how they go about managing stress and managing the day-to-day challenges. And I'm still continually learning through that process, because Myers-Briggs type indicator, psychological type, is an incredibly deep topic, and people can continually learn more about themselves through that. And then, having done that and having analyzed who I am and what I am and recognizing my psychological type, I'm now in a better position to actually work with those strengths, work with those gifts. And it makes me a much better leader, a much better emotional intelligence trainer, and a much better facilitator and coach.
When you say find out what's special for you, are you talking more about the employee or the leader?
I'm talking about both. I'm
Okay.
talking about both. It's giving people the opportunity to say, this is the way in which I use my preferences. I have a preference for intuition. I have a preference for feeling. Combining the two together means that I look for ideas of working with people to allow them to work in better ways by empathizing with them and understanding them at a deeper level, and helping to coach and encourage them along the right path that they choose for themselves.
I know you already kind of talked about the idea that you're still learning and still growing. And when did the point happen that you felt you knew enough that you could basically help other people on their journeys of being a better leader by putting out books, putting out, building a business, and so on and so forth?
Well, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, Vinny. I don't think I've ever got to that point where I think,
Okay.
oh yeah, I've got there. But my roles in the pharmaceutical industry changed. I went through 2 or 3 redundancies, and I got to the point where I thought, do you know, I can make myself redundant here. So I took the opportunity to look inwardly and say, what are my special gifts? What can I do? Can I set up a business here? can I become an entrepreneur? Now, I got some marketing skills, I got my selling skills, I got my leadership skills. I'd also got a little bit of knowledge and understanding around basic psychology, both from a practical aspect and from a theoretical aspect. So it was really a case of looking at how I could package those up in a way to set myself up in business. And I did that, must be about 15, 16 years ago. And I've never looked back, Vinny, because it really has given me the inspiration to grow, develop, and to help other people along the way.
Now, what's that process look of working at the pharmaceutical company, getting some sort of steady pay, and then transitioning from there to all the other avenues that you've kind of jumped into? Was it jumping into starting your business? Was it jumping into writing the book? And what was that process of leaving that company and kind of going on your own journey?
Well, the process of leaving the company was something which I had very little choice over. As I said, my role was made redundant, so I was in a really fortunate position in the fact that the role had been made redundant, so I hadn't got any option to carry on with that role. Now, but I've been kind of thinking over the preceding years, I'd like to set myself up in business, but I hadn't got the bottle to do it. And the reason why is I had the golden handcuffs. I had a company car. I had a very nice regular monthly income. I got bonuses. I had share options. If I'd have left, I'd have had to give all those up. Well, the very fact, excuse me, the very fact that the role was made redundant meant I had no choice. So it really was a case of, right, put your money where your mouth is, Robin. Go and set yourself up in business. And Vinny, honestly, it was really, really tough. It was horribly tough. I mean, there was 1 month where I earned the grand total. I'm in the United Kingdom. I earned the grand total of £10. That's what, $15.
Yeah.
I earned that was my monthly income, and that was a set of vouchers for the local chemist shop. That didn't even cover my contact lens solutions, let alone pay the mortgage and put food on the table and pay all the bills. So that was working really, really hard to try and get business. And to do that, I had to go out and network. I had to go out and sell. I had to go out and meet people. I had to go out and talk about what it is that I could do and the transformations that I could make in people's lives to anybody who would understand and listen and say, you need to be speaking to so-and-so, you need to go and do that. Well, going and speaking to so-and-so and going to do that took time, it took money, it took investment. But I knew that if I had to be successful, I had to put that level of investment in.
Being that you didn't want to leave the company and you were kind of forced out of the company and forced to start your own business, and you weren't having maybe instant success, was there any thoughts in the back of your head to go find another golden parachute, another company that would take you on and provide a good salary?
Bear in mind that this was the third redundancy that I'd gone through.
Okay.
So I was kind of geared up for it, and I was kind of getting to the point where this is becoming too regular an occurrence. But to honestly answer your questions, in my darkest moments of despair, yes, it would have been a lot easier to have looked for another job with another company. But again, if I'm being perfectly frank, you have to spend all your time focusing in on getting another job with a company rather than submitting your resume, submitting an application form, and then suddenly all the doors will fly open because you've got all this great experience and all these great accolades. So it is never, ever an easy job to make a transition. And I think the important thing in terms of the road to growth and in terms of being an entrepreneur, everybody who's going along that road knows that it's never easy. There are very, very few people. I know there are some people that fall on their feet, but it's hard. But it's very rewarding. And if you put your mind to it, you can actually grow and develop in a far better ways than you ever could within a corporate environment.
In the low moments like you talked about, and I know the idea that it would take so much time to actually apply other positions. And in those low moments, what was that driving factor? What would you tell yourself? What would you look towards to allow you to kind of get through those low moments?
I think it was a level of self-belief, and also it was a level of look, if I'm going to make this a success, I've got to make it a success. Nobody's going to make it a success for me. Therefore, I've got to persevere. And at a certain point along the road, I was saying to myself, look, I've come so far. Don't give it all up now. Don't give it all up for the easy luxury of going into another job within a corporate environment. Go out there and carry on doing what you're doing. Now, the interesting thing there is a lot of people that I was speaking to were employed, and they are part of a corporate environment. And I don't think a lot of people in the corporate world really understand entrepreneurship. They don't understand what it's like to run your own business. They kind of have an expectation and they run it through their own filter of being employed. So when you're talking to them about different ways of earning income, of selling, of working for yourself, more often than not, you've got an uphill struggle in terms of trying to get them to understand that and accept that.
Well, yeah, that's definitely something that I've heard more and more on this podcast, where I think I've had people on from Ireland and some other European Union countries, and the idea of entrepreneurship is more of a anomaly than the actual norm, and it seems like it's transitioning. What's what's that transition been like since you've been in the in this space?
Well, I still think that there are a lot of people out there who think of themselves as entrepreneurs within a corporate environment because they have a degree of creativity and innovation. But quite honestly, they haven't experienced the joys, the delights, the moments of despair of working for yourself and what that means. And I would rather speak to somebody who tried for 5 years, failed, and now works within the corporate environment than somebody who, from leaving school and leaving university, has just gone within a cushioned environment of working within an organization. If I can share with you some of the clients that I work with doctors in the National Health Service. And here we have a group of people who like to think that they're entrepreneurial, but and they are being encouraged to be business minded. But quite honestly, they couldn't run a corner shop because they've been mollycoddled all the way through their academic career. They move into becoming a doctor within a hospital or within a general practice. Everybody looks up to them. They've virtually got a job for life if they want it. And they're well paid and they work very hard for what they do. But they have no understanding of the real world outside of the clinical environment, outside of medicine. So when you talk to them about a logistics director within a retail chain, they look blankly through you. They've got no comprehension of what that person is, what that person does, nothing. If I talk to them about the type of work that I do, they come in with some preconceived ideas. Now, chances are they'll get it vaguely right, but they won't get it 100% right because they just do not understand. And one of the capabilities that I have to say they're not very good at is empathizing. They're very good at sympathizing because they've been trained that way. But trying to understand things from people's perspectives, trying to see things from other viewpoints is something a lot of them struggle with.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's through their training. I think they have been trained to look at a clinical situation, make a judgment very quickly, and then test their ideas to make sure that they've got their ideas right. And if their ideas are not right, then they move on to another pathway. So I think it's a lot of it is algorithmic thinking, but a lot of it is trained through experience, and they will often quote research and go back to studies and academic work, and they get their comfort that way because it's evidence, it's proven, and so they've got something to fall back on.
Well, in I guess the opposite side of the spectrum, I mean, what would be the ideal demographic? The what business is usually the most willing to grow and expand that you've worked with?
Um, I think the businesses that are most willing to grow and expand are those people who have decided they're going to do it for themselves. So here I am in Greater Manchester in the northwest of England, and for many years prior to the pandemic, I would be out there networking, and I would get a lot of learning, a lot of engagement, a lot of great conversations from people who are prepared to move away from the cushioned, comfy jobs within the corporate environment, to give it a go, to go out there, to make something of themselves. They've got an idea and they go out there and they want to make a difference. I find them very, very rewarding people to engage with. Some of them, well, as you probably well know, most of them are very good at telling you they're incredibly busy, and they will use very successful language. They may or may not be. To a certain extent, it's none of my business. But how can I help them? What can I do to help them on the pathway to success? What is it that they can do for me? And there's that kind of give and take within that environment, which is very, very refreshing and very rewarding. And I now go back to some of my old pharmaceutical industry colleagues who've been in the pharmaceutical industry for 25 years or thereabouts since I've left. And their thinking is very, very narrow because that's their experience. That's their experience. They're good at what they do because they're adapting to the environment that they know that works for them. To a certain extent, I've been lucky because I had that taken away from me. So I had to do something completely different. And I can look at them, don't take this the wrong way. I can look at them and sympathize with them because they haven't had my opportunities, but they've had a very, very good career because of the environment that they've worked in. And they've done very, very well for themselves. But I look at them and I think, that wasn't for me, and I'm glad I didn't go down that route.
If you could look, I mean, 5 years in the future, where do you see your business expanding to, and where do you see yourself expanding to?
Well, 5 years in the future, I will see my business expanding very much on the global stage. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I really have been looking at working to drive through the principles of applied emotional intelligence internationally. I suppose a decade ago, I was saying to people that I was going for global domination, and it was a bit of a joke. But quite honestly, I think I'm in a position to say I'm going for global domination here in the field of online learning with emotional intelligence. And everything that I've been working towards has been allowing me the opportunity just to be that and to do that.
Well, Robin, I appreciate you being on the Roach Growth podcast. If someone's listening and they're looking to get more information about what you offer, maybe one of your books, or just find out if maybe you're a good fit for them, what's the best way of getting more information?
Well, they can contact me by looking for Robin Hills on social media. My name comes up very, very frequently, although I do compete with other Robin Hillses. Put in Robin Hills Emotional Intelligence into Google or any other search engine, and up I will come. Or you can look for me on my website, EI4Change. That's EI number 4change.com. Or write to me, robin@eiforchange.com. I'm more than happy to connect with anybody, engage with them, communicate with them. So if you're listening to this podcast and you want to get in touch, please get in touch.
And all that information is in the show notes. I'm gonna finish off one last question. So it seems like when you were working at that pharmaceutical company, and you were redundant, I guess 3 times before you were let go. Have you ever thought about it, if you were never let go and you were working at that, is there something that someone could have told you to open your eyes up to the possibilities of where you are today at that time?
What a fascinating question, Vinny. Luckily, I don't know the answer to that. You're asking me to project myself back into the younger Robin who...
Well, or let's change it then. I mean, if someone has a friend and they go, "Oh my gosh, this person is very, is very well put together. I think they have a lot to offer and they should start their own business." Yet that person is scared to kind of leave that golden parachute that they're currently working with. Is there advice? Is there words of wisdom that you would tell that person or that friend to tell their friend?
Let me answer that question more directly. What I would say to somebody is firmly believe in what it is that you're capable of doing. Make sure that you've got it right, and then jump. Just do it. Just go for it. Knowing full well that in the moments of deep, dark despair, you can always look back at your resume and say, I've got these skills. If I can't get it to work, somebody else will pay me to use them.
I think well put and easily put. I mean, the unknown is scary for people when you have that, like you say, that golden parachute, those golden cuffs, right? And it makes it less appealing, especially if you have family, because now you're not just basing on yourself, you're on with people you care about. And do you really want to be on your deathbed one day going, what if?
Yeah, I think I can proudly lie on my deathbed with my family around me and say, look, I did my best and I'm pleased I made the decisions that I made. I tried my best to support you as I went through. I had a very young family at the time, and when they were very, very, very young, I needed that stability of the corporate environment. That's what I personally needed. As they grew a little bit older and they become a little bit more independent, it was a lot easier for me to make that transition. So I think you've just got to look at your own life and say, it will never be right. The time will never be right. So don't look for the right time. Get yourself to a point where you think, yes, I can do it. And go ahead and do it. And if you don't have the luxury of somebody pushing you out the door because the role doesn't exist anymore, i.e., your role's been made redundant, then sorry, I'm mixing up my sentences here.
No, but it makes sense. I mean, have faith in who you are. Have faith in what you are, and I mean, have probably people around you that are going to support you. And I mean, sometimes people need that kick to get out in that role that they are. I mean, I know for myself personally, before I transitioned into real estate, and I'm so happy I got into it. I was in a business, in a career that I was making really great money. I was making great money, yet it was killing me inside. And I needed someone really close to me to kind of pull me and shake me and going, do you really want to do this for the rest of your life? And it was one of the best things that could ever happen to me. For people listening right now, you might not have that person that you actually talk to, but that person is there.
Yeah.
I mean, that person is there.
Can I add something to that? Because you have been extremely successful in the real estate area. Now, that is an area which I could look at and think, wow, there's great money to be had there. It bores me to tears. It's just not an area that I want to work in. Yet, I know that I could set myself up as an entrepreneur there. So what I would say to your listeners is just don't look for the money. Look at what it is that energizes you.
Yeah.
Look at what it is that can make you an entrepreneur. Look at what it is that you can do that will make a difference to people's lives, and go out there and do it. And just don't do it because, oh, Vinny's done it in real estate, I'll do the same. Robin's done it in the field of emotional intelligence, I'll go and do the same. No, right to the beginning of our conversation, Vinny, what is it that you're good at? What are your skills? What are your talents? How can you utilize those as an entrepreneur? That is entrepreneurship.
So true. Well, thank you guys. Please subscribe. Please share. Go in the show notes and find Robin. Bye, everyone. Hope you have a great one.